Hello again YouTube, my name is Bree, and in today's video we're going to be talking about my Swatch book. This particular Swatch book is something I made earlier this year, and this video has been requested, so I apologize for the delay in creating it. I'm having a little trouble with the lighting and setup for this particular video because everything is very reflective, as you can see, and I'm currently just sitting on my floor upstairs, which is also not the best environment for filming. I wanted to try filming with natural light. I have a lot of windows upstairs, but the lighting keeps changing so dramatically that I'm kind of stuck with the lamp anyway. Before I go any further, I do want to point out two things. First of all, if you are just here because you're interested in seeing me swatch my beam paints, as you may have seen in the title, go ahead and look in the description below. I will provide a timestamp to that specific point in the video when I start swatching. Otherwise, if you're interested in a video that inspired me to create this swatch book, please check out the link for Denise Sodden, also known as In Liquid Color, here on YouTube. She actually created the swatch cards in this style, I believe. She may have gotten it from somewhere else. I should have rewatched that video before I started filming this one. But that is the video I had seen that inspired this particular style of swatch cards. And yeah, I totally recommend you visit her video before making your own. So these swatch cards are basically done in the same style as hers, except I went a little smaller. My cards are 2x3, and the sleeves I'm using to store all of these are business card sleeves. So I just bought business card sleeves off Amazon, whatever was on sale. I guess it was Amazon Basics, and they fit really well. I have a little bit of space at the top, but it just makes it a little easier to turn. If you go, I believe it's 4x3, which is what she did. You can use baseball card sleeves and store them perfectly well. I like this because I can see a lot of colors in one go, which is basically what works best for me. You may already be noticing there's a bunch of empty spots here. Some of that is because I will be swatching paints at the end, and I know exactly or roughly where those are going to be placed here, so I went ahead and made space. And others are because I pulled them to talk about them. So let's talk. Give us a flat surface to work on and start by going through kind of the anatomy of my swatch cards. So once again, definitely stole this part from Denise. Nothing original here. Basically, I took a sheet of watercolor paper. I use arches. The goal of choosing your paper is to choose something realistic to what you work with. If you were to swatch all of your swatch cards on Canson XL, for example, and then try to paint on arches, you are... Hi, Juno. I apologize, I locked myself in with my cat. We're going to try to proceed and play it by ear. I hope that's not terribly annoying. Okay, so this is a swatch I made of alizarin crimson on Canson XL paper and arches paper, and that is my cat. Sorry. So as you can see, can you just sit there and behave? No, she can't. I'm filming a video, bud. Okay. So as you may have seen before a cat inserted herself in the video, the paper selection makes a major difference on the color of the paper. These two swatches are both using Daniel Smith alizarin crimson, which is one of my absolute favorite colors, which is a terrible shame because it's extremely fugitive. So a fugitive color is one that will definitely fade in the sun. It has no light fastness, so if I were to leave these in the sun, alizarin crimson is going to turn brown, kind of a yucky brown, and it's a shame because I think it's an absolutely beautiful red. I think I'm going to have to pause this video. Hold on just a second, buddy. Okay. I'm a professional. Now, back to the paper comparison. I'm not trying to tell you you have to use the highest end paper you can find to make your swatch cards, but you should aim to use roughly what you intend to paint on. So if you are painting on Canson XL paper, go ahead and make all your swatches in this paper. It's going to give you the most realistic indicator of what your paint is going to look like when you put it down on the page. In my case, my goal is to ultimately be working on a 100% cotton paper like Arches, and so that's what I went with my swatches, because I wanted it to be the most true to life in the Swatch book. And yes, it did hurt to cut up so much high quality and expensive paper to make these little swatch cards, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. You might notice that I actually paint on etcher paper quite a bit because I'm more used to using sketchbooks, but I wasn't going to cut up a sketchbook to make this, so I had Arches on hand and I decided to use them. So once again, before I put this away, I think you should be able to tell pretty clearly the difference in both the color chroma and just how deep the color gets. It's so much stronger on the cotton paper. If you're using Canson XL, I'm not trying to say this is bad paper. It's absolutely what I started on when I started doing watercolor, but it's definitely not a high quality paper, and these swatches kind of just meant to show that. So let's put that one aside and talk about this one. See if I could zoom in a bit more. So the anatomy of the swatch card is once again basically what Denise did. I leave a little spot blank at the top, and this is meant to contain the information about the paint itself. So I have the paint brand, the paint color. The black line is actually created before I start painting. And then after I paint, I add the pigment properties. So the pigment itself, as I'm flipping through the swatch book, you notice there are a lot that don't have that information there. That's because they were made by handmade paint makers, and they may not have provided that information. I feel bad asking because it may be a trade secret, especially if they do a different combination of pigments. So essentially, I don't have I don't know if the paper cutters are called guillotines or whatever, those big paper cutters. Those would be best for making these. I don't have one of those, so I just put my paper down on a cutting board, or a cutting mat rather, and then take an 18-inch ruler and use an X-Acto knife and cut along the right markings. I'm not very good with scissors, so that works much better for me, though my swatch cards are definitely not identical in size or shape, but that's not a concern for me. Once I cut the 3 inches for the top to bottom, I go down 1 inch and I draw a black line in a waterproof pen. It's important it's waterproof or else it'll just smudge everywhere. I think I've been using a Pigma, a Sakura Pigma graphic pen. They're a little bold. A lot of people use Sharpies. Oh, excuse me. So the purpose of this line here is to tell you if the paint itself is opaque. If you look here, if I could get to focus, this particular line is meant to show the opacity of the paint, because if it's a pure black line after you paint that swatch, it is transparent, semi-transparent. If it starts to get foggy, you're moving into the semi-opaque range. And if it's really foggy or not even visible, particularly with darker colors, you might have an opaque paint. This gives you an indication of when you're layering the paint, what type of, what you're going to see. If it's opaque, it's really going to cover up the paints underneath it. If it's very transparent, you could get some, thank you, buddy. You can get some really nice glazing effects. I use both opaque and transparent paints in my paintings. It's just a matter of knowing what effect you're trying to achieve. So there's nothing wrong with having an opaque paint. But here, play with the Canson XL one. Okay. So after that, the goal is to create a nice even wash, a gradiated wash, to show the paint mostly from its most concentrated form down to a very, very watered down form. This doesn't have to be perfect, at least for me. It really depends on how you want to use these paints and how you want to use the swatch cards. For me, having this mass tone, which is the most concentrated version on the right, is good enough for me and makes up for not having that perfect dark at the top of my gradient. I really just want to reference the whole range, and I'm not as picky about... Now my other cat is in here somehow, and she's typing on my keyboard. Oh my goodness, professionalism. So, I might just have to start this video over again. I also don't have a script, so I'm just really winging it today. So, that's pretty much the anatomy of the card itself. We have the gradiated wash, the stripe to tell us how opaque it is, the brand name, the color name, and the pigment properties, plus a mass tone stripe. Not everyone uses that mass tone stripe. These swatch cards are meant to work however they work best for you. If that's not a way that helps you, that's fine. This is just what works for me, and I'm not telling you there's only one way to do it. So, we'll see if my cat will let me flip through my swatch book a bit more. So once again, I think I already spoke on the convenience of being able to see all of your paints together. Before I created the swatch book, my swatches were by the palette, so each palette had its own swatch page, mostly that came with it or that I created for it if I created my own palette. And they were done on pretty crummy paper, or paper that came with it, so I didn't have a good indicator as to what I was working with. And it was starting to become an issue, especially as I started to move into making my own palettes. I really didn't know what I had. So I wanted to go ahead and finally organize these. And a couple things I noticed right away. One, I had no idea what paint I had in my collection. I found that some of the colors were so distinctly unique and other colors were so distinctly different. Or similar to each other. What may have appeared as being unique in one palette, I'd find out that I have so many colors so similar to it. And this was becoming an issue because I might buy another paint not realizing I had one so similar to it because I just wasn't tuned in with what was in my palettes. So this definitely helped me organize my collection and my brain, and really understand what I had and where I might be lacking. And honestly, I wasn't lacking. I have way too many paints. It also helped me realize things like how different paints of the same pigment can be. I just kind of skipped right through this. At a glance though, all of my general colors are at the beginning and then I move into earth tones. I just couldn't figure out how to integrate earth tones with the regular colors. So I kind of start over with earth tones towards the back and then go into the ultra darks. So a good example would be PR 101. Let's try to, the glare. So PR 101 is a really interesting pigment. It's a nice brown, but there are so many varieties of PR 101, and you can see that the first one here in the corner, I'm sorry, I'm holding the mic with one hand so I can't really point and hold this at the same time, is it's transparent sienna. It's a very light brown. And then we move into the PR 101s down here, some of them being very transparent, some being very opaque. We have a more rusty red. We have some that are more purple, like this English Venetian red, I believe. I can't really read from this angle. That has a lot more of a purple tone to it. Just because you're buying two paints with the same pigment number does not mean they're going to be necessarily the same. Everyone uses their own versions of that pigment, I guess, or they use the pigment uniquely enough that it can cause some differences to occur. So one thing I learned doing this, or really acknowledge doing this, is that just because you like a color and you have the same pigment name, or yeah, the pigment code is the same from one brand to the next does not mean you're going to get the same paints. And it's not even a matter of it just being slightly lighter or slightly darker. It can be completely different. So it's important that if you have a paint that you really love and you want that exact color, you may want to just reorder it from the same brand because you may not get the same color from somewhere else. Another thing, and I'm just going to go ahead and pop this out because it'll be a bit easier to see. Just because a paint appears one color in the mass tone does not mean it's going to look consistent as you lighten it. So this, I'm not sure if that's in focus. Come on. This is a genuine mineral paint from Daniel Smith. They have a Prismacolor line that's all made from actual minerals. And this is called Sodalite Genuine. And I might be pronouncing that wrong. I'm not very good at this. In its mass tone, it is a very deep dark black, a little cool in tone. But as you start to paint it into a wash, especially a wet wash, it granulates so uniquely. Can I get it? Focus? Focus? Come on. No, I can't. So if you're using it in a more lightened fashion, you might receive a massive texture shift that you were not aware of if you had not made big swatches. Maybe you're more aware of these things than I am, and I'm just a little slow on the pickup. I knew this was a granulating paint, but the difference between that mass tone and the watered down versions is absolutely incredible to me. Another one that hit me a few times, and I will pull out this one for it, is some paints, and this is another Prismacolor from Daniel Smith, Piemontite Genuine. Ignore my pronunciation. This particular one, sorry, apparently I don't know how to convince my camera to focus, but this particular paint has a very significant color shift. So while you do see some red tones in the mass tone, when you actually lighten it up a lot, the color is so drastically different to me. So it goes from a brown to this really pleasant pinkish earth tone. I'm really bad at describing things today. And that knowledge is very important because you might expect it just to be a lighter version of this color, and to me it's not. And you can see some granulation there too. I think in this case the actual particles are a lot darker than the underlying paint color, and that's just my interpretation. Once again, I can be completely wrong on that guess. There's another example I had picked out, and I think I picked this out more as a mental thing, but not as from the swatch itself. No, the swatch isn't showing it as well as I've seen elsewhere. Daniel Smith Imperial Purple is a combination of PV15 and PB29. And in the darker tones, it tends to be a lot more of a rich purple. And sometimes, and this might be paper-based or how much water was used, sometimes it moves into a really gentle pink. And yeah, once again, you can end up with a different color than you're expecting depending on how much water you use. So those were some things I noticed and that I use these swatch cards for. I also really like to just go through these and pick out limited palettes. I've gotten used to using really big palettes. I bought a big palette to mix a bunch of paints that I had bought, and I have a very large Schmincke palette. So going through this allows me to pick select colors and maybe make a 12 set palette, a 24 set palette to take with me if I'm traveling, going to a coffee shop, which is very pre-2020, or something else. So I don't just have to pick a giant set to take with me. I could be a lot more conscious about the color choices I'm making. And, you know, once you make those color choices, you still make some test swatches of different color combinations within that particular palette, because you might pick out some beautiful reds and blues that together make horrible purples. So it's important to take that time to really learn the colors you have. This is just one step in that process. I did not turn off my volume on my phone. So yeah, I can't believe how long I've talked about this, and I feel I haven't said much, and I'm just flipping back and forth. I am definitely in fidget mode, so I apologize. Now, I think I said virtually everything I had planned to say at this point. Like I said, I haven't really planned this out too thoroughly, so I want to take a second to zoom in and try to show you these particular cards in the order I have them. You know what? Let's wait. We'll wait. And I will go ahead and cut to me unboxing and swatching the beam paints, and I will go into voiceover mode so that we can talk about how I get the gradients, because I know a lot of people have trouble with making these nice smooth gradients. And then afterwards, once I have them all organized and have all my paints together, then we'll do a final flip through, and I will make sure that I do it in a place where I get rid of this nasty glare or can work around it. So if you're still here and still listening to me, I super appreciate it, and I will see you in the voiceover. Okay, so I'm back and I am now in voiceover mode. At this point, we should be unboxing my new beam paints. If you missed the previous video, I'll try to link to it somewhere. I did a prior unboxing of beam paints, and I did a small speed painting in that one, and it was fairly popular, so I figured I would go ahead and unbox again. In that particular video, I did speak a lot more about the company. I really do love what she does. Anang Beam makes her own paints. She uses sustainably sourced materials from her island in Canada, and she makes a really great product. So I definitely wanted to try to get some more paints from her. I'm actually going to be entering a no-buy starting... Technically, it already started. I wanted to do it in 2021, but I decided that these paints would be my last purchase. I think I bought them on November 12th, and yeah, well, it took a while for them to arrive, and then I just haven't gotten around to swatching them yet. So this is where I guess time to do it. No time like the present. So from this particular order, I got the Mother Earth palette, which is 4 different colors that are made with local pigments, well, not pigments, but local minerals that Anang harvests from wherever. I don't know a lot about paint making, I guess stones and such, and then she makes the paints with them, so they're very, very special, at least to me. I really am starting to get into these really earthy pigments, and I was very much excited about it. I really want to try these out in some of my paintings. And then I also got some of the Mayan paints. I'm totally spoiling this because I'm just now opening it in the video. If my video software is playing things at the right time, the right speed. My computer is very old and very slow, and it does not do video editing all that well. But yeah, so sorry for the spoilers, but yeah, those are the 2 paint sets I got. The Mother Earth palette, and then the 3 of the Maya. One is rose gold, and it is a bit sparkly, or quite sparkly actually. One is Mayan indigo gold, which is less sparkly, but maybe I just need to get into it a bit more. And the other is Mayan green, which has no mica. It's just this really pretty blue-green that I could not resist. I've never used Mayan paints before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. And as you'll see when I actually swatch them, they were not really the best to use as an example because they did not apply particularly smoothly. And I think that was actually the paint more than my inability. I know there's some degree of nerves associated with swatching or doing anything in front of the camera, but I really don't think that was it. So I believe we should be moving on to the actual swatching part now, or my video just froze, I'm not really sure. When I do these swatches, I already talked about the cards themselves, the little sheets of paper I'm using. I did want to take a second to point out that I use 2 different cups of water. One is for dirty water, so whenever you have paint on a brush and you need to clean it off, and the other is for clean water. This is a very common practice in watercolor, But to me, it's very important to separate out your clean and your dirty water when you're doing swatches to make sure that you're working with just the color you intend to use. And you'll see as I'm working, every time I put paint down, I wipe up my desk too, because I don't want any of the paint that settled on the tabletop to come back onto the card of the next one I'm painting. So I kept the beginning of this video in real time. I wanted to do at least 2 swatch cards that were completely real time, and then I just sped it up. And I debated about doing it all on camera and decided to go for it because I think you probably want to see that it's not always simple and straightforward. The first 2 that I swatched actually went really smoothly. And then after that, I actually had several that I struggled with, either trying to get that really smooth layer of paint, which I could not seem to do with the Maya paints, or just struggling with the general pigmentation of the paints. I didn't expect the green paint to be so faint, and I did look it up after the fact, and it really isn't a high impact paint. I just didn't expect that, so I kept digging in and trying to get more and more paint, which wasn't working. So you'll see that I go back to some of the paints a couple times and re-swatch and try to fix the swatches and make them look better, but you know, there are limitations to what paint is capable of. I guess part of my problem really, I didn't test the paints in advance. Normally I'll do a quick swatch and see it in a sketchbook, and by the time I'm actually doing the swatch on a swatch card, I'm a lot more familiar with the paints I'm working with. And in this case, I did the swatch cards first, and I didn't know what to expect. So it might help to be a little bit familiar with the capabilities of your paint before trying to get that perfect gradient and really understand what you should be expecting to see. I'm sorry, I'm a little like fuzzy brain right now because I just got interrupted by a phone call and I'm trying to jump back in and pretend that this is all one smooth voiceover, and it's not. Yeah, so I'm not really sure where I am in the video right now, because once I start speeding things up, and the whole recording and trying to play back in the editing tool at the same time is not so great. It'll take me probably about 3 hours to export this video, so I'm just being impatient today. But yeah, so let me just talk a bit about my process, and if it's not in perfect synchronization, that's fine. I go through it several times. But essentially what I do, and I kind of did things out of order today, or rather yesterday when I was filming this. Normally I would write down both the paint brand and the color at the same time, and then just make sure I'm swatching the right paint on the right swatch card. But I kind of forgot, and then wasn't completely sure. I didn't have the names up in front of me. I was already filming, so I went in and added the names later. I don't want to promise things I can't keep. So I think the first one I swatch is the Mars Violet, and it is a beautiful color. This is definitely the one I am the most excited about. So I go ahead and usually wet the paint first. I don't think I did it here, which was, some paints take a little longer to activate, so it helps to put some water on the paint while you're setting up the card. Then I actually go ahead and I wet the card below the line, and what that does is allow the paint to flow a bit more smoothly, which helps me get a smoother gradient. Sometimes I go above the line too, but it doesn't really matter. The beam paints don't have a super strong flow to them, so sorry, cat's making loud noises in the other room, I think. So it's not like with like a core watercolor where you put the paint on and it's just going to start traveling down that card and giving you that gradient really easily. This, you kind of need to push it yourself. So I go ahead and I wet the lower half of the card, and then I really work to get the brush saturated with the paint. So I want to use I use a flat brush, usually a wash brush, which is just I believe the difference between a flat and a wash is a wash brush is slightly longer. And then I just get both sides saturated with paint so that it feeds through the brush. And when I'm going back and forth, I don't have a dry spot to pick up the paint on the opposite side. I I know I messed up on the first card, but typically I start above the line, make that first stripe, make sure it's nice and bold. If it's not, I know I'm probably lacking in paint and haven't soaked up enough. And then I start just working my way down the card. When a paint is being very cooperative and I'm on the top of my game, I can just go up and down at once usually and get a really pretty gradient. Sometimes I go over it again just to get more saturation or more pigment down to really make that color pop. I try to make it as realistic as possible, and I try not to force it because I don't want... I'm going to do the mass tone stripe later, so I'm going to know what that full impact is, and this was more like what I would expect to see pulling paint from that pan. So then I just kind of work my way back and forth at whatever speed seems to be working best for the paint. And once I make my way all the way down, I don't always go to the very bottom of the card. And even sometimes when I do, I go back and clean my brush and add some water to the bottom, because since the card is wet, it is going to flow that direction naturally. And I want to be able to get that last bit of naturally moved paint. One thing I don't do is I don't use a hairdryer or heat tool to dry the cards faster. I want to see the paint in its quote-unquote natural habitat, because like a gradiating paint, a paint that granulates, a granulating paint is going to granulate more the more it sits in that water. And if you use a heat tool or a blow dryer, it's going to dry it faster, so you won't see quite as much granulation. Sometimes if you really want to showcase the granulation of a card or a paint on a card, and it's not granulating as quickly as you want it to, or as well as you know it's capable of, you can also tap the card, just kind of lift it up and tap the back of it, and the tapping will help those particles separate, which should improve that granulation. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting confused with my G words, the granulation. So I don't think I did that on a lot of cards, but it's something I occasionally do on paintings when I don't maybe have a wet enough surface so it's not separating as much as I want it to. Just that gentle tapping helps make things spread. Now, if your card is too wet and you start tapping, you might just be flinging water everywhere. So practice, caution, whatever. So I think if I'm at the right spot, I should be moving on to the second card, which I don't remember the color name off the top of my head. I really like this one too. And I kind of go through the same process, wetting the bottom of the card, putting the paint down, and then dragging it down with the back and forth strokes. As I move into it's the third one, the green. That's that first one I really struggled with because the paint was not as pigmented as I expected, and it was coming out almost like nothing. So little disappointed in that particular color. I was just hoping for a little bit more punch, and maybe once I start working through the paint, maybe it just has a slightly drier spot on the top. Maybe I'll be able to get more, but my immediate reaction is it's not going to be a paint I grab very often, and when I use it, I'll try to feature it in that kind of light tone. It won't be a big mixing color for me. In general, I kind of feel that these Mother Earth paints are probably something I'm going to use when painting more natural things, and I'll want to showcase those paints on their own and not do a ton of mixing with them. I don't know. I really wanted these paints, but I don't really have a plan for them. That's another thing. When you have as many paints as I do, you kind of have to force yourself to use some of them sometimes, or identify how you want to use those. Like when I do this kind of painting, I'm going to use these paints. Like, so when I try to do animals or scenery, I tend to gravitate towards my Daniel Smith because they have a lot of granulation and provide much more natural textures for environments. And then when I'm painting people and characters, I tend to go more for my Schmincke because they're smoother and I get a lot smoother skin tones. So sometimes I play with granulating paints in skin, but generally speaking, I tend to go for more flats. So what else is there to talk about? So yeah, I guess swatching isn't the most exciting thing, but I did want to share how I go about it because it has come up a few times, and I do apologize for not having the smoothest paints to showcase this, but maybe it's it will help because, yeah, it doesn't always work out. You don't always get perfect gradients, and you know, as long as the card is capable of showing you what you need, that's awesome. And who knows, maybe I'll go back and try to re-swatch that Mayan green later. We'll see. I don't know. I'm generally pretty lazy, so I'm probably committed to what I have at this point. So after the second card's done, I do speed up the video. Only the first 2 cards are at normal speed. After that, I speed it up to, I think, 3x, just so you could really still see the process as it happens without being in boring real time. At some point, I do slow it down again so that you could see the mass tone stripe in real time, and then I think I speed it back up for the rest of the swatching, including when I'm just writing down the names. I don't think I actually put down any pigment information because I didn't have it at hand. The mineral pigments, the Mother Earth, are natural minerals, so I eventually wrote that down. I'm still not sure about the Mayan. Beam doesn't post the pigments used, so I don't know if it's the traditional Mayan pigments or if it's natural or whatever, so I just didn't write down anything. The 2 that have gold, rose gold, and Mayan indigo gold, both definitely use a mica. And when I ended up putting those in my swatch book later, I chose to keep them in the mica section rather than putting them in the normal paints, because I probably won't be reaching for them for general painting. I'll be reaching for them for special accents like I do with Maya paint. Or sorry, with mica paint. I'm confusing all kinds of words this morning. Oh Lord, it's actually the afternoon. My day is getting away from me. So, what else? I guess I don't have too much else to say about this particular part, so I think I'm going to take a bit of a break from the voiceover, go get some water, and then we'll switch to some general comments. Okay, so I'm now comparing my timestamp in my audio compared to the video, and I could tell you my video in my editor is not playing remotely in real time, so I was a lot closer to the end of this video than I thought. If you've made it this far, you get 2 gold stars. So let's see. In just a few moments, I think I will be switching to the point where I'm actually going through the actual swatch cards themselves. I just kind of had to fold it in half and hold it away from the light so you can see each one, and I kind of scroll through it pretty slowly, so you should be able to pause and take a look at anything you're interested in. If you have any questions about my process for swatching, swatch cards in general, or my paint collection, let me know and I will be happy to talk more about that in the comments. Otherwise, I don't think I have too much else to say about swatching itself, so I guess that's it, and this has been a very long video. Going forward, just a little bit about what I plan to do in the future. I am going to try really hard to get out 2 videos a week. I don't know if that's sustainable, but hopefully I'll be able to start the beginning of the year strong. My next video will probably be a painting. I'm not sure of what quite yet, but we'll see. And then the video after that, I think I'm going to do a sketchbook tour because I haven't done one of those in a while, and I have plenty of completed sketchbooks to go through. So we'll see if I could do that without being too self-deprecating. And then going forward, we'll kind of see. I do have some, I might as well talk about it briefly now and we could expand on it later. I do have some goals for 2021, and one of them is to do more detailed pieces that I plan out more in advance and really think through, starting with some thumbnails, maybe some color studies, and then into full pieces where I actually have characters and backgrounds together. I know that's wild, so we'll see if that works out. Ideally, I'd like to have maybe 10 to 12 pieces that kind of fit into the same theme. Kind of like I was building a portfolio, though it's not meant to be used as a portfolio. I want to have something consistent that I'm happy to present. Hopefully I don't get too frustrated with it and give up on it. I tend to be really bad about planning out pieces because if I think on something too long, I get tired of it and tend to move on. but we'll see. I have some ideas in mind. I'm not ready to speak on those precisely yet because I don't want to, I don't know, overthink it now and lose interest before I actually commit to it. So we'll see. And if I do go through those planning phases, maybe I'll do a multi-video series where I go through from thumbnailing to actually coming up with a composition. We'll see. Don't want to overcommit. Another thing coming up is I am going to be participating in a D&D game. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm mildly excited, mildly nervous. I'm pretty excited about it. So I've been designing my character, coming up with a backstory, which is not a strong suit of mine. I'm not a storyteller. I love to read, but when I try to come up with the story, I'm just like, oh, that's been done a million times. That's from this, and I get so caught up in what might be cliche that I completely lose track of like what I'm trying to accomplish. So once again, I don't want to overcommit, but I'm kind of hoping to have time to make like a little travel journal for my character's adventure. So we'll see if I get to do that. I do have a bunch of sketchbooks, so I could definitely set one aside for being a travel journal. I don't know if you could tell by my voice. I think I'm a little excited about this idea, so we'll see if it happens. Beyond that, we'll see. It's a new year, and I tend to make all these commitments in the beginning of the year that I completely forget about by the second month. So maybe by putting it in video format, you guys can call me out on it and make me stick with it. Hurrah. So anyway, this will definitely be my last video for the year. So I hope you all have a wonderful end to 2020 and an amazing beginning of 2021. Here's to hoping next year will be much improved. And once again, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the little cat cameos because those were voted to stay in the video. So I hope you liked meeting Juno. I'll try not to let my cats get into my paints too much. And yeah, I guess I already kind of signed out. So take care. Talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.